All right, so this is going to be part 3 of a series that we're covering on all of the different supplements. We've already gone over the big picture, we've gone over protein, we've gone over creatine. If you haven't listened to those or watched those videos, go check them out. But if you're here at this point, we are going to talk about actually what happens before the workout in terms of pre-workout.
Yes.
So one of them is like C4 that you see all the time. I will put my hand up, and I did in the first episode, and say, like, I was just taking it in high school myself, thinking like, oh, if I take this before my races, I am gonna, like, blood's gonna be flowing through my veins and X, Y, and Z, and I won't get to it, and I won't ruin it for you. But I was like crashing afterwards, and I looked at the label, and it was like equivalent to like 3 cups of coffee per serving, and I had never drinking coffee before. I had never had caffeine, and I was like knocked.
Oh yeah.
So what do you do? What do you say? Now let's just kind of introduce it the same way.
Yep.
Hey, coach, what about pre-workout? Is that going to help me get what I'm looking for in the gym or working out?
Yeah. And this one's unique because pre-workout, well, first, we're talking pre-workout in terms of energy boost, performance enhancement, in terms of kind of, I guess, let's call it just energy. Energy levels, the ability to attack a workout or attack a race, attack a game or whatever.
Yeah.
Pre-workout at times also is discussed of like, the carbs or protein you should be ingesting before a workout. So we're generally talking about 2 separate things, although a lot of times those products intermingle. So right now we're going to talk more to your point, that hype you up pre-workout, the NO explodes, the C4, and you're exactly correct. So, I've taken them, right? I'm not going to sit here and say I haven't. I think what most coaches will experience is what I experienced probably every year, but one that sticks out to me is maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where even though I had these conversations with all my kids, like we do this a lot. I put out a nutrition guideline with supplementation and everything every summer. And yet this one, I didn't know they had been secreted. Instead of up near the weight room, like I've talked about in previous podcasts, like the ledge where they put their proteins and whatever else that we've talked about, they were hiding C4 down in their lockers in the locker room, which is separate from the weight room. And they were taking that, I don't even know in relation to what workouts, but then they were taking out before practices, before games, at halftime, etc. And I caught them caught them. Like it looked like they were doing something wrong when I walked in at halftime one week. And I was just like, what are we doing here? Instead of focusing on things like hydration and replacing our energy stores, we were huddled in the corner pounding down C4. And so it's something that I think is very worth coaches diving into, because it's a little less black and white than, say, protein or creatine, because pre-workout isn't a thing. It's an amalgamation of a lot of different things. So we should talk about all the different pieces. Kind of bottled up, being told, like, take this before your workout. Yes. And I think the first place to go is where you mentioned most pre-workout, most fat loss supplements, almost most anything that you buy that has anything to do with energy level or metabolism is almost entirely caffeine.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's important to note that caffeine has done something of a 180 in, kind of public performance-specific convention. In the sense that even 10 years ago, I was playing football overseas with Mr. Ralph, and we walked in at halftime, and people were literally grabbing coffees. We were like, what are you doing? That's going to dehydrate you. You're going to crash, all this other stuff. And we were like, what? Our minds were blown. Fast forward 5 years later, just a few years ago, people are like, actually, coffee doesn't dehydrate you at all. Caffeine actually has proven to improve performance, aka muscular strength, aerobic capacity, anaerobic capacity, all of these things. Caffeine does, right? Which is not surprising. There's a reason everybody takes caffeine regularly via coffee, almost the world over.
Yeah.
So is caffeine a possible ergogenic aid that is not necessarily a bad thing in a pre-workout? Sure. But your point was spot on. They put so much friggin' caffeine in these pre-workouts. It's like housing down 4 cups of coffee.
Right.
So you, I think, as a coach and an athlete, need to first decide, am I a caffeine person? What I mean by that is caffeine's addictive. It's more addictive than like cocaine, I believe they've proven, right? So would I love to say that I am not addicted to caffeine? Probably. Am I? Probably. Is that a good thing? Probably not. Right? So can I then willfully recommend somebody use that on a daily pre-workout supplement regimen that is at such a high level? I don't know that I would.
Well, I think the important point too is like there's a big difference between sipping on your morning cup of coffee high school kids do it too. That I don't know if that's great or bad in its own sense. That's maybe a topic for another conversation.
But that's what makes it interesting, because that is the conversation. We're basically just saying you're going to drink 5 cups of coffee before every workout.
And mainline it. Like take it in like a little tiny thing of water, mainline it, and just like run through a brick wall and see how your workout goes. So obviously I think what we're also going to then talk about, and what I think we're about to get to, is like that then leads to, having trouble sleeping, getting nauseous, all the side effects of too much caffeine that can come with the fact that it's getting pumped into your body. And I think we don't have to beat that one over the head. So when you start to actually look in that and everything else, caffeine aside, what are you trying to do when kids are being like, well, what about this one or what about that one? Like, is it the same thing? Like, hey, are you sleeping enough? Are you drinking enough? Are you eating enough for this to be worth it? Or where's that kind of, like you said, like it's a little bit more of a gray area? What's the like gray area in it all?
So for me, I call pre-workout in my own kind of internal inventory the least, the farthest from me recommending it to a kid, an athlete, or taking it myself.
Yeah.
I supplement with protein powder. I would take creatine if I really wanted to improve my actual sprint and power performance. I don't really need to anymore. I'm 34. Pre-workout, I'm not in love with. If you're okay with caffeine, I think that's fine, because that's primarily what you're taking. But then just have some coffee, because to your point, first, those come with so much caffeine that you're drinking 5 cups of coffee, which is insomnia, digestive issues. If you're talking about before a game, do you want to sit on the toilet for the next 30 minutes because it can give you the craps, right? Like, you don't necessarily want that from a game performance.
Yep.
So the whole halftime, pregame, not a big on it, because also, what do we know about caffeine? You said it. Like, when you took it, what happens?
You crash.
It's a boom here and then boom. Because if you're focusing on just caffeine intake, then you're not thinking about the carbs that you need.
Yep.
You're artificially jacking up your CNS. And it works, right? So it does work. Like, if you're going to go lift it for 15, 20 minutes,
yep,
you're going to go sprint 15, 20 minutes, maybe it does help you overreach just like creatine would. For a 3-hour, 2-hour, even 1-hour game that's not necessarily a full sprint for 20 minutes, I don't know that it's the best idea. And then what you were alluding to is there are a lot of other things in most pre-workout supplements.
All right.
So we want to dive into those.
Yeah, and I think the biggest one outside of the caffeine that jumps out to me as something that I think back to like the taboo or I think people aren't quite sure about is like you hear like NO explode, nitric oxide. Like that's the one I think people start to see. Some people are like, let me get as much as I can, bottle it up, and I'll take it. And other people are like, you should not be putting that into your body.
Yep. Again, I've taken NO pill form, actually, back in the day. It's a vasodilator. Think of it like this. It's going to relax and expand your arteries and capillaries so that blood flow is increased. It's marketed as getting a good pump, which that's what a pump is, right? It's your muscles have filled with fluid, both blood, water, and everything else. And so theoretically, and blood is basically, your gasoline, your fuel that promotes recovery, performance, the ability to do anything. And so theoretically, nitric oxide could help you, maximize your performance. Again, it's not going to do anything monumental. There are a lot less proven results in terms of actual performance gains with nitric oxide. It's in a lot of different forms. It's used for other things like erectile dysfunction. So saying that you're going to take this because you want to get better at sprinting, and you're taking the same as a 60-year-old man looking for a much different reason, is saying that, like, you need to understand that it does one thing, which is increase blood flow. That by itself doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding that, one, it's going to increase blood flow. It's also going to relax arteries, like we said, which can lead to, there's a reason that on all those commercials, the reason I mentioned the whole ED thing is on all those commercials, they say what? You should not take this if you have a heart problem, if you have high blood pressure, if you have any of these symptoms already, because that's a recipe for disaster.
Right, because you're trending towards those things anyways as you're taking it.
It's, if you're going to go out and, again, maybe you're going to go do a few sets bodybuilding or mass building in the gym, maybe it helps a little bit. Maybe it make you feel good looking in the mirror. Are you going to go play a 3-hour football game on a Friday night, jacking up blood flow before the game starts? Me personally, it freaks me out a little bit, because now you're risking things on the field that we worry about with, extreme, fatigue, because you've basically pumped stuff through.
Passing out.
And what I mean by that is, you see anecdotal stories of, a hockey player that said, I used to take this before games. I took a bunch of pre-workout that had an NO in it, and then I went out into the ice, and after 5 minutes, my calves were so full of blood, so blown up, they had to get taken off the ice and wrapped in like heat wraps and all these other things to kind of counteract the increased blood flow to areas that you don't necessarily, you want blood flow, but you don't want too much, right? Like, again, anytime you intercede and put something that, again, it might be natural in the sense that it's not like you're manufacturing testosterone, but anything that didn't happen organically within your own within your own body and its own processes, you could throw off a balance that is delicate and desperately needed to keep you on the field. You might think more is better. It ain't.
Right. Well, I think that gets to your halftime walking in is like, if a kid takes it at the beginning of the game, and I will be the first to admit, I did it too. I was like, I'll take it. And then halfway through, I'm like, I'm not feeling great. Take some more. But as I get into the second half of a meet, but same thing for your games. It's like now you're pumping it because you have to, and it's you're for lack of better addicted to it.
You're keeping up with a high, and I was probably in the heat of the moment, but I was like, no wonder we suck in the end of the second and the end of the fourth quarters. Our high has worn off, and we haven't done the things that have put ourselves in a good situation to perform long term. So pre-workout is labeled pre-workout for a reason. I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to do pre-competition, unless your competition is the same as a workout. You're going to go run one race and track. A cup of coffee might do you good. Mm-hmm. Cup of coffee plus nitric oxide, plus they have beta-alanine and niacin, which people are allergic to. If you ever taken a niacin supplement and get niacin flush, you're red, you turn red, you get itchy, you tingle. The moment you take it, you're like, this isn't natural, right? So there are a lot of other things in it, including, by the way, creatine is almost always paired with pre-workout now. Mm-hmm. Bang for buck, selling point, all this other stuff. Don't go take a pre-workout thinking I'm going to get energy from pre-workout, creatine from creatine, and protein from protein. Look at the label. A lot of these pre-workouts, they don't even call them pre-workouts in the research studies. They call them multiple ingredient pre-workout supplements, or something like that.
Well, so I think you've done a good job in the first two parts, and I think we're landing it now all home together here, is like you got to be mindful of the bigger picture and also understand that like what you're taking needs to be considered in the big picture. Like not like, hey, I'm taking this, but like what else is in it? Because now I'm like, if I'm doubling down on all of these different things, building on more creatine, more this, more that, and that's where these kids, outside of anything health related, to your point, is like, are you just wasting money?
Yeah.
You know, like, are you just buying a bunch of things to buy a bunch of things, and because it sells and and I'm sure we will not, after this, Chalk Talk will probably not get a sponsorship from
supplement company.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
Sorry to the founders, but
no, that's fair. So look, if I can use myself as an example, I'm not training for performance, but I'm still trying to train, and I'm trying to feel as good as I can, look as good as I can, perform as good as I can. Supplementation is not something that's off the table for me. I'm not saying that it shouldn't ever possibly exist. It needs to be very, very directed. What I mean by that is, again, I use MyFitnessPal every single day. I track every single thing I eat, or as best I can, on most days. And what I noticed, it was like a year ago, I was like, wow, I am wildly deficient in like zinc and magnesium and certain other things that I'm like, I'm going to need supplementation for that unless I change my diet drastically. And as I said, I'm not a great eater. I don't eat, just bad. Just call me a bad eater. Mm-hmm. So maybe, and protein. So I need protein, I need zinc, I need magnesium. So, I went out and got, let's say a multivitamin for men. There's a reason a lot of people promote multivitamins, because it's going to cover all the things that you might be deficient in, because it's not just protein and carbs. It's not just creatine. It's all the vitamins and minerals, mm-hmm. right? But each one of these supplements often puts a whole bunch of things together. So I went and got one supplement for one reason, call it X, and then I went and got one for another reason, call it Z, maybe zinc, right? And then I realized, wow, X and Z both have zinc in it. Now I'm doubling up, which means that I've not only, taken what I didn't realize I was ingesting, I'm now taking twice as much as I thought I needed, which is never a great idea.
Yeah, and I think probably where I want to finish, if you'll let me, is let's just bring it back to the student or the student athlete.
Yes.
That we, maybe not the fiery halftime speech of Sam Breslin, that sometimes can happen, which is, as coaches, we all understand and appreciate. But like, now let's put the kind of like, let's meet the student, the athlete, whoever, and have the conversation so that they know kind of the best foot to put forward, if you will.
Specific to pre-workout? Or?
Yeah, like, hey, I'm thinking about this, or I'm taking it, or anything like that. Like, what's the best thing that we can steer people towards or away from, just in a larger picture? What would you tell a kid or a student athlete that's kind of looking and saying, I want to take this because I think it's going to help me?
Well, first, identify why do they think it's going to help them.
Yep.
Correct them on whether or not that is even true, right? We talked about what it can and cannot do. Maybe not necessarily anywhere near a good idea for games, in my personal opinion, maybe possibly for a workout. But my first question always for pre-workout is, are you dragging ass? Like, are you not really eager, willing, ready to work out when you have to work out? Are you in the middle of your, the insulin spikes after like lunch, and then like that siesta period in the day? If like you have to work out at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's when your energy levels are the lowest. Okay, let's identify that. Well, first, is your nutrition okay? And then second, like, let's try a small cup of coffee. If that does what you need it to, maybe we do that once in a while.
But you know what? I'm going to stop you there, because I think what's funny is, like, I'm sitting there going, a high school kid taking a cup of coffee at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Right? That seems weird. So if that seems weird to a coach or teacher, the pre-workout should immediately feel weird. And it seems to the kid, well, I don't want to take a cup of coffee. Like I think that is a really good indicator. If any coach or teacher, including myself, feels uncomfortable with that, then you should probably think about even taking one step back further.
Yeah, you beat me to it. If coffee is off, I would have actually forgotten, because what I wanted to say was, forget pre-workout entirely. If you are not a caffeine person already, if you haven't supplemented with anything for energy levels, or like forget a pre-workout powder. You can go buy a cup of coffee or make a cup of coffee for 10 cents. If you, as an educator, to your point, are not comfortable saying that, like, hey, what you could do is have a cup of coffee or half a cup of coffee before a workout. If you feel uncomfortable saying that, pre-workout shouldn't even be on the menu.
It's off the table.
That shouldn't even be near the menu.
Yeah.
If as an athlete you're like, coffee scares me. If you just like, I don't like the taste of coffee, then other caffeine, like you can, a flat diet Coke or a flat Coke is going to get you the caffeine. Like caffeine's everywhere.
Yep.
So you got to decide whether or not you are a caffeine person first.
Right.
And I would say that, to your point, that might be something that's more of a personal choice.
Yeah.
As a coach, what you're willing to recommend. Theoretically, there's nothing like legally against me saying like you guys should drink coffee or should not. because it's just considered okay by everybody.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a supplement. When it's put into pre-workout, now it's a supplement. But I would look at it as, let's just think about caffeine because it's the primary driver of all of these supplements anyway.
Yeah.
And it's the one that's the easiest to identify as a coach, a teacher, student, or an athlete. Is this something that I think is a good idea, or do I not want to? Because again, is there a benefit? Can there be a benefit?
Yeah.
Yes. Is there a downside? Yes.
Right.
Crash and addiction.
So let me ask you this, and this is where I'll want to stop because it's a little bit separate, but it's in the same vein of what I think is now. It was popular, I think, a few years ago, and now it's kind of went away. But is like all of the vitamin B stuff. Do you know what I'm talking about with that? Because that's another one that I think it's well, you don't like coffee or you don't want this, and let's just throw a bunch of vitamin B because it's going to give you energy, and then you see
with the niacin and everything else,
the B12, the B this, the B that, and
that was beta alanine and niacin that I referenced is beta alanine is B3, I think, vitamin B3.
Yeah, so those ones. That to me too is one of those things where you read it and it's you're getting 5,000%.
Yeah, well, and when you read it as vitamins, you're oh, it can't possibly be bad. Vitamins are just the same as anything else. You can take too much or too little. You can get too much or too little. You can eat them naturally elsewhere. And I would also caveat is every month, every year, there is a new mineral or vitamin that everybody is quote unquote deficient in, and you should run out and take 5,000 times the amount of. Right now it's iodine, which is crazy. There are probably truths to some of it. There are probably marketing falsehoods to some of it. What I'd recommend is just making sure you have a well-balanced diet because that has served the human race for 2 million years, and you don't necessarily need to supplement with anything.
Right.
True supplementation and targeted supplementation, I think beyond protein, creatine, I think of very kind of foundational things that you don't need to do a lot of thought or research of your own body, your own self, your own track record. Once you get into all of those vitamins and minerals, are you taking too much of it? Are you taking too little? Do you get enough of it? Do you get any of it?
Yeah.
Because the BCAAs, are you really in any way, shape, or form in need of any of these things? If you're sufficient in all of those via diet, taking more doesn't just magically help. Correcting deficiencies can certainly help. There are a lot of people that say, I have been in a brain fog for 4 years. Went to a doctor, said you might be, zinc deficient, iodine deficient. I took sea kelp for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden, I feel like my old self again. That happens.
Yeah.
But it's not everybody takes sea kelp and all of a sudden becomes smarter, right? But that's what people see because on advertisements, it's this can help this.
Yep.
Not this can help this if you have this problem.
Yeah, all this different issues.
I think from a supplementation standpoint, let's keep it very, very simple. Understand what is out there. And I personally, from a high school student athlete to maybe summarize, I wouldn't recommend anything that isn't truly foundational.
Yeah.
Protein, you should recommend protein, not protein supplementation. You should recommend getting the right amount. Right. If they need a powder, you might help them find one that's not awful that could help them reach their goals. Same thing with creatine. Is it evil? No. Is it going to change the game for them? No. But is it something that if they're looking for the edge, they're the top tier of trainee and they want to, try? It's safe. It's possible. It's affordable. You can work with them on that. Anybody under 18 should have a parent involved.
Yeah.
I think maybe we didn't mention it at the beginning, but that's you shouldn't be necessarily the one that's determining what they put in their body.
Right.
The parent should be involved. And then from pre-workout, if I had to just say yes or no, I'd say scratch it. I don't think it's worth it necessarily. Caffeine is caffeine. You can get it from a lot of sources. Maybe decide whether or not that's where you want to start.
Yep. Perfect place to wrap. So thank you for diving into all three. This was a great kind of 3-part series that I think everybody can kind of pick which parts they have questions on and dive into a little bit. So thanks again. And remember, at Platform, it's always in pursuit of better.